Great, Ed. Do you want to go ahead and kick us off here?
Yes. Wow, sorry, I was not following my time schedule. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? What happened?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Come.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry that I wasn't here right at the moment, but the moment is always the moment when I'm able to chat with you all, even if it's this way. I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting today, and just want to let you know that the co-chair from Washington, Lynn, will not be here today. I'm carrying the load, which is not that heavy, but it's a pleasure. I'd just like to say that I just want to thank all of the members of the CAG for your dedication. I know meeting this way is not my favorite way. I am really looking forward to the time when we will all be able to meet somewhere and perhaps a few minutes before the meeting start, have a chance to have a few words. I know there are a lot of you that I know and you know me, and I'm a people kind of person. I'm still getting used to this Zoom, but the fact that you all are on it makes it good. I want to thank also the committee members all of you who are doing a lot of work. I know you're getting information back to us, and really want to thank you for that. And I think that you can see that though we don't have the opportunity to get together and meet, that what you're doing, the contributions that you're making, even in these difficult times, are really meaningful. So I just want to thank you so very, very much for your work and for your participation and just sticking with it through this difficult time. And so I would like to pass it on to Mr. Johnell to ask him to please review the webinar and public comment details. So Mr. Johnell, I turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Community Advisory Group meeting. Before I kind of review the material, I'd like to take a moment to introduce one of our new members, Whitney Mossback with the Cowlitz tribe. Whitney, would you like to take a moment to say hello to everyone?
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say hello. Whitney Mossback. I am a Clark County resident, a wife, a mother, and an enrolled Cowlitz tribal member. I'm also an elected official on our tribal council, and I serve on a number of other boards. I'm here to learn and to assist as needed and to report back to our tribal council, much like our previous chairman, Bill Ayal did. And my work is in collaboration with Kim Stubbe, Chairman Ayal, and Cassandra Sellers-Reck. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Whitney. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce someone that you all will have a chance to get to know fairly well, Jason Hagan, who will be helping to coordinate Community Advisory Group. Jason, would you like to take a moment to say hello?
Yeah, thank you, Johnell. This is day 3 for me, getting invested and getting to know the CAG and seeing familiar names. So just happy to be here. I'm a Portland resident, born and raised in Seattle, but been down in Portland for quite a while. But very happy to be here and get involved and meet you all. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Next slide, please. Just a note for those who are viewing, as well as our Community Advisory Group, we do have closed caption made available both in English and in Spanish. English closed captions are available within the Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. That's https IBR.news/captions. Next slide, please. How to access closed captions. It's at the bottom of your screen. You should see an option that allows you to click the closed caption option. If you click that, a separate window with captions will appear. Next slide, please. Again, thank you for joining us today. Please join either by audio or computer, not both. We want to make sure that we reduce any of the echoing that often occurs in virtual settings. We encourage panelists to please turn on your video. Again, it's helpful for us to create a sense of community, even in this virtual setting. So to the degree that you can and to the degree that you are comfortable, please do keep your video on. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. And if you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 503-897-9219. Next slide, please. Just a reminder with respect to our public comment, there will be a public comment opportunity around 5:45 p.m. There are a number of ways you can give us a public comment. You can use our phone option, which is 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 993-5459-6043. The passcode is 674942. And you want to dial *9, which will allow you to raise your hand. At that time, we will call on the raised hands. After you are invited to speak, we ask that you press *6 to unmute yourself. Next slide, please. To submit your comment in writing, you can fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. You may also leave comments via voicemail at 360-859-0494 for our Washingtonians, or 503-897-9218 for our Oregonians, or a toll-free number, 1-888-503-6735. If you can state CAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. Next slide, please. Again, thank you for that material. Just to review our agenda real quickly, we've had a chance to do a quick welcome. We're going to review some feedback. We'll have an opportunity to get a report, a really exciting report on all of the wonderful community engagement that has taken place. Then we'll get into the meat of the matter. We'll have a discussion with respect to the update on the draft purpose and needs statement, and continue a discussion of vision and values. We'll then have an opportunity for public comment and then wrap up. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of our operating norms. Essentially, these are our rules of the road. For us to really put relationships first, to keep focus on our common goal. Our common goal is a replacement option across the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. For us to notice the power dynamics in the room, and for us oftentimes to check how we are showing up. If you are someone who often speaks up a fair amount, maybe take a step back and allow for others to step up and speak a little bit. So we ask that you sort of monitor your engagement as well as if you're a person who oftentimes is more reflective and may not speak up as much, we ask for you to push yourself and to create space to speak up. For us to create space for multiple truths and norms. You all have been invited and carefully selected to serve on this committee because of what you bring both your lived experience as well as your professional experience, we need to create space to allow that to occur. To be kind and brave, to practice examining racially biased systems and processes, and for learning is all part of how we will operate. Next slide, please. Just a quick update. As you will recall, in addition to the community advisory group, we have an equity advisory group as well as an executive steering group. And at each meeting, we will spend time just reviewing sort of what has occurred in each of those areas. So the equity advisory group met on Monday, and we had a great opportunity of receiving update on community engagement activities, including online open house and digital survey. You're going to receive that same update in just a few moments. We reviewed and discussed the draft definition of equity. One of the first primary elements of work for the equity advisory group is to help the program develop a definition of equity. Equity is a word that is often used, but until we can define it, we can't measure it. And so the EAG will help to define a definition of equity for the program. The EAG also provided guidance on draft equity language and purpose and need, vision and values. And we had a really great, robust conversation about how does equity show up within the context of purpose and need, vision and values. Our next meeting will be March 29th, 5:30 to 7:30. Next slide, please. The executive steering group update. We've had two new members representing the city of Portland, Commissioner Johnell Hardesty, who of course is now the Transportation Commissioner, heading the Portland Bureau of Transportation. She replaces Mayor Ted Wheeler. We've also had Steve Witter, the Director of Construction and Engineering. General Manager Doug Kelsey retired on March 5th, and there's an interim member until a new general manager is hired. The next meeting will be on March 17th, which will have an opportunity of reviewing and discussing working draft purpose and need, vision and values, and initial feedback that they will receive as a result of the community advisory group's work, all of your work, as well as equity advisory group, and what we've heard from the community engagement process. Future meetings will occur in both April and May. Again, the notion of all of our committees is to strive for consensus recommendation on purpose and need, vision and values to share with the bi-state legislative committee, which of course is the two-state bi-state committee made of select members of the legislatures. Next slide. So with that, I turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Lisa Schauer. Lisa.
Thanks, Johnell. So we wanted to reflect a little bit about what we're hearing from the community advisory group. And we'd like to do this in a couple different ways. So the first is to just share with you a little bit about what we heard at the last meeting. And some of those themes you might recall included a bit of a choose your own adventure. So we did some polling, some live audience participation, and based on the percentage of respondents, we spent our time talking about growing travel demand and congestion, and we looked at costs and funding. We kind of narrowed down some of those purpose and needs statements that had been previously identified in the planning efforts, spent a little bit more time talking about that, and then doing some breakout sessions. We felt like we also heard an emphasis on designing a program that meets future community needs, and that seismic vulnerability is the second most critical problem in the program area. We are asking you to provide us feedback in this setting with a lot of different people on one big Zoom screen, as well as in smaller breakout sessions. Because we're meeting for 2 hours, and oftentimes we have a lot of information that we need to provide to you either before or during our time together, we just didn't feel like we had enough time to connect more one-on-one. So we reached out to several of you, and we were able to connect with 6 of you. And those meetings were awesome. We learned a lot. We were able to ask some questions about how we structure the meetings. We were able to get some really good responses in terms of the materials that we're sending, some of those logistics that we don't necessarily have time to cover here, as well as just some really good feedback from you. So Lauren, who's a member of our team, will be reaching out to everyone, and we just wanted to kind of set a little bit of a tone for you. It's really just a check-in. There's not an agenda other than asking you how things are going, what's working well, what we can do to make some improvements so that this is a meaningful and valuable use of your time. We know that we're finding as a program team just how critically important your feedback is. So a big shout out and thank you to Martha, Sam, Sarah, Rondalee, Michaela, and Tom Hickey for making the time over the last couple weeks to meet with us. We're on a path to meet with at least 6 more between now and our next meeting. So just a heads up when you do get a message from Lauren to try and coordinate some time with us. I also wanted to share some of the things that we've heard include just the need for us to try and find time to connect, maybe with a little less aggressive agenda. So we're trying to find ways to perhaps set some time where you'll have the opportunity to call in and have a conversation with us. We're talking about how we set up public comment so that it allows for enough time for our public to provide feedback and comments in a meeting like this. How to make sure that we're also balancing the need for each of you to feel safe to share in these meetings. And how to utilize your ideas, your thoughts, and your connections within your communities to help us engage a broad and diverse community. We also know after we finish these meetings, we put together summaries of what we heard. Sometimes those are multiple pages. In fact, they're almost always multiple pages. And we each learn differently. And so we've also engaged an incredibly talented graphics artist named Elise Birnbach, who put together a picture of what she heard at our last meeting. And so that's this graphic from our February 24th meeting. Now, keep in mind, this picture can't obviously articulate every single thought that was mentioned in the meeting, but is meant to be that high level summary. Elise is actually on today, and she is in the process of trying to capture what we discussed in our meeting. She did that on Monday when we looked at the feedback from the Equity Advisory Group. We're just trying to find different ways to ensure that we're helping our community understand what's happening in these meetings without necessarily having to sit in and participate or watch them or be involved, but allows them to kind of continue down this pathway with us as we update our purpose and need and begin the process of clearly articulating our community vision and values. So I just wanted to kind of highlight this, just let you know Elise is on and that we intend on doing this for at least the next couple meetings. And any feedback that you have, we really appreciate. Again, it's just meant to kind of be a picture to capture what happened during our time together. Okay, I think I've kind of covered everything that I'd hoped to in about 5 minutes rather than 15. So what I'd like to do is transition over to our community engagement presentation. I want to make sure that I frame this in terms of this is the conversations that occurred during the month of February. It is both a combination of quantitative and qualitative feedback. We're really proud of the outreach, and yet we do know that this is just the beginning of a conversation, and there's more work to be done here. Katie Belliconi is actually going to present for us our overview of these conversations. You know Katie because she's been involved in our community advisory group and helping us not only recruit but stand up this amazing group of community volunteers. And Katie will continue to be involved, but we did want to introduce Jason because Jason's stepping in as Katie focuses even more on our community engagement strategy. So with that, Katie, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Thanks so much for allowing me to present this information to you guys tonight. Next slide, please. This just shows you most of the ways that we reached out to the community in the month of February. Really, the intent was to provide an opportunity to different community members to learn about the program and respond to the purpose and need and vision and values conversation that we've been having. We'll talk about all of these elements a little bit more in the slides to come, but I will just point out that the online open house was really a place where people could learn more about the program, get some background information. It had a welcome page, and we actually had more than 16,000 people visit that page. We also used a new type of digital language translator on that site that allowed for 9 different languages to actually translate all of the material that was found there. Next slide, please. This, yes, social media. It was lots of different paid advertisements and banners. We actually had those translated into 7 different languages so that our community engagement liaisons were able to reach out to their communities specifically. We had direct mail postcards, advertisements in various different ways. We did something new, which we reached out and used the radio to do some advertising. One was in Spanish, and we spent some time trying to reach out to organizations directly, ranging from neighborhood associations to business associations and everything in between. And as a follow-up effort, we made about 75 phone calls to those organizations that we were most concerned maybe didn't connect with us through that initial email attempt. Next slide. In our online interactive survey, we had more than 9,000 people respond to that. Out of those 9,000 people, we received more than 14,000 open-ended comments in that survey. You see that there's some statistics there on Spanish and Vietnamese. That was because those were 2 languages that the entire interactive survey was translated into. But we also worked with our community engagement liaisons representing 8 different languages to reach out directly to their community to ensure that this survey was accessible. We just want to make sure that you know a couple of things that this survey was not. One, as Lisa mentioned, we have not had time yet to go through and understand all of what we heard through those 14,000 open-ended comments. So that work continues. This survey here doesn't include the overarching themes of what we found in that information. And this also was not a statistically valid survey, meaning that it was an opt-in option. Next slide. This shows you the areas that people reside that took this survey. Really, the takeaway here is that we had people participating all the way as far north as Seattle, and then all the way down to Southern Oregon. Really, the hot spots, if you will, where most of those people are from, is kind of interesting. In Portland, we really found that the folks that participated the most are people who live right in the program area. They reside right near the bridge in neighborhoods like Kenton and Irvington, St. John's. In Washington, it was really different. In Vancouver and Clark County, I should say, we had respondents that were from more of the outlying rural areas, including places like Battleground and even Yakult. It's interesting. You can kind of think about that different ways. Obviously, there is a density difference that you have to consider when thinking about why that may be. Next slide, please. Demographics. The real takeaway here for me, I would say, is that on race, overwhelmingly we had a white Caucasian response to the survey. When you drill into that a little bit deeper, it's about 73% of our respondents were from that category. That is pretty consistent with the statistics we see about the race demographic within our program area. So we do feel like it's close to representative of a non-white breakdown. For age, we had a pretty good range of people from different ages participating. The one exception to that would be we didn't really capture as many youth voices. And income, there was the participants generally were from a fairly high income point. The one thing I would note on that is that you see down there that only about 60% of people who took the survey did answer that question. Next slide. This is, as you know, we asked CAG members to also take our survey. You had a unique link, and so we're able to compare what we heard from you against what we heard from the general public. Your statistics demographically were pretty comparable to what we saw from the survey participants. Next slide. Into some of the details of the interactive survey. That first exercise was asking folks to prioritize the transportation problems that they experience within the program area. Overwhelmingly, we heard that congestion and reliability is a concern for people, followed by earthquake vulnerability and general transportation safety. Next slide. This is where it gets really interesting, is when we compare that to your results. What we saw is nearly identical to what we heard from the general public. The one difference on this slide is that I believe in the freight movement was prioritized slightly higher. Next slide. Activity 2 was a mapping exercise where we asked people to mark the area within the program area that they experience problems, and to also categorize, identify what that problem is that they experience. On this slide, you'll see that there were about 20,000 markers dropped. The colors identify the number of problems in any given area. So the pink, for instance, was the biggest concentration of where those markers were placed. The pink is identifying in the thousands of the people who dropped pins there. We're talking about 3,000 and 4,000 in that area. The categories that were identified, by far, congestion was the biggest problem that people identified, with more than half of all of the markers were related to congestion. There were about 11,000 of those. Next was safety with 3,000. Ped and bike and transit both individually received 2,000 markers, followed by poor connection being identified as a little more than 1,000. Next slide. The third activity was asking community members to identify the values that are of most importance to them under these different categories. We were able to compare what we heard from the general public to the CAG. You'll see for value 1 here, commitment to equity. It was interesting. You had one value that was the same as what we heard from the rest of the population, which was minimizing impacts on neighboring communities. I will say on this one, we only listed the top 2 in each of these categories, but all of the different values that were listed under the equity category received very strong remarks, and these were the highest ranked too, but all of them received a lot of support. On the next value, environmental, what you said, protecting fish, wildlife, and the habitat, as well as prioritizing water quality, was exactly the same as what we heard from the general public. Next slide. Safety and vulnerability, less time sitting in traffic and making sure the bridge is earthquake ready. So again, getting back to that congestion, reliability, and safety as prioritized by both you and the general public. Cost and funding, one same, one different. What was interesting is this group identified an iconic landmark being important to you. Next slide. Transit and multimodal. Extending light rail across the bridge was identified as important to this group, as well as the general public. You guys also said that creating a safe space for crossing the bridge on bike or foot was of the most importance. Economy and community, exactly the same results, prioritizing future generations when considering how to design and build this program, and supporting the efficient movement of goods and services, really speaking to freight needs. Next slide. Community briefings. We hosted 4 different community briefings in February. We had close to 200 people that participated in those. One of those events was a Spanish-only opportunity. We've also had about 100 people watch the community briefings on YouTube, consistent with some of the things we've heard already in the different ways that we reached out to the community. You'll see here that 34% identified congestion and reliability as the purpose and need that they would like to see identified through this program. Then again, followed by seismic vulnerability and transportation safety. Next slide. The EAG, similar to the CAG, has been talking about the purpose and need. They've really been looking at that and wrestling with that and the vision and values through the lens of equity. You'll see some of the themes that they've been really have been summarized based on their conversation and feedback. I won't read them, but it's to the tone of consider affordability and impacts on those with low incomes. Do not further harm communities who have been historically victimized in the corridor. Next slide. Direct stakeholder engagement. We touched on this a little bit earlier about how we've been intentional about reaching out to more than 300 organizations. And I spoke a little bit about how we've had those follow-up conversations with some of the organizations that we most wanted to make sure we connected with. Multicultural outreach, the liaisons have, speaking 8 different languages, have worked within their communities, and they were responsible for helping their communities in those different languages complete more than 300 of our interactive surveys. And lastly, on this slide, I'll just say that public comments, in addition to all these other ways, we've had opportunities for people to email in their comments about purpose and need and vision and values. And we received close to 150 comments through those different mechanisms during this comment period. Next slide. Next steps. So in March and April, we actually in the next week have 4 different listening sessions coming up to make sure that we really are hearing from a couple of the groups that we didn't hear as loudly in the survey results, and that's communities of color and youth. After we finish that up, we're going to continue to spend time working with this data to really try to incorporate what we heard into our program moving forward. You can look forward to seeing more of a comprehensive summary about this and what we've continued to hear in an engagement report that will be made public the end of March or the beginning of April. In May, the program will be finalizing the purpose and need, vision and values. Bye.
Bye, Mom.
Bye, baby. Excuse me. And in the summer, we will be moving on publicly to establish screening criteria and develop alternatives. Next slide. And that's all I have. With that, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to do this work with the community.
And maybe before we head to the next section, I know we just threw a lot of material at all of you, and maybe we can just take a few moments to answer any questions or hear any reactions you might have to any of that material. I'll ask if folks can use the raised hand feature, and we'll call on you from that perspective. So maybe just take a few moments. Are there any questions or comments with respect to that material?
Looks like Irina has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question about the last slide. She was saying that in April, we are going to have meetings with the communities of color, but the slide was saying communities of concern. Are they the same thing or different?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Johnell.
Yeah, maybe let me take that. Communities of concern, as we're defining it for the program, includes communities of color as well as other marginalized, historically marginalized groups. So it's not just communities of color, it's in addition to. And I see that we have Ashton and then Tom.
Thank you, Johnell. Good evening, everyone. One thing that stood out to me, I mean, it's the biggest stat that always stands out to me, is the more diverse and the less earning communities did not really participate and give any data to that process. And I know that, you know, we have upcoming events in those communities, but whatever, you know, I can do on my end to make sure that we are reaching those communities, man, I would love to work with you, because a lot of those folks need to be involved in this process. And I know that given the time and the right communication, we can get across to them so we can get their input on this as well. That's what I got.
Thanks, Ashton.
We'll take you up on that offer, Ashton, because you're spot on, and we need to do more and better. We have Tom and then Marcus.
As a member of the CAG, I don't feel like I'm prepared for these meetings. And I can't really ask good questions right now. I need to look at the data and all. Why can't we get the slides prior to this meeting?
Well, Tom, that's a great question. We do the best we can to get material to CAG in preparation for these meetings, and we'll continue to improve and get better. Part of the difficulty that we've been having is oftentimes it's very much hot off the press as the program is evolving and doing sort of the day-to-day work. But Lisa, I'm wondering if you want to chime in here as well.
Sure, I think it's a really good point, Tom, and it's definitely what we're striving to do, and why you're seeing a shift from meeting every other week to meeting once a month. So not only I think is that part of our commitment to honoring the volunteer time that you're each giving, but it's also ensuring that there's enough time to develop the materials, to process what we heard at the last meeting, and provide you enough time to be prepared. Most of the time when we're asking you, like in this scenario, for any questions, is just to get your initial reaction so that we can determine what other feedback we may need to gather and how to be prepared for the next meeting. So we absolutely recognize we're not looking for you to provide any detailed comments when you're just now hearing and seeing the data.
Frankly, your response concerns me. We're going to once a month, when we don't have adequate time as it is to discuss these issues, to look at the draft documents. And when we're talking about hot off the press, not all of them were, but we can actually get them, you know, the day before, and that'll give us at least a little bit better. But I just don't feel like that I'm living up to my commitment to the CAG and to the communities in this area because of this lack of preparation. And so to go to once a month and still not be prepared and not have the adequate time to discuss these is very concerning to me.
Well, Lisa, did you want to wrap?
Well, I was just going to say that, I think what's important here is also to ensure that we're clear about the roles for the advisory group. And this is really an opportunity for you to advise us on how we're moving forward, for us to share some information. But we certainly don't expect you to be in a role where, we're asking you to do detailed work. That doesn't feel like it's honoring the commitment to bring in volunteers. At the same time, we want you to be able to add meaningful feedback. And so I absolutely hear what you're saying, and we will work on improving and ensuring that you have materials with enough time to be ready to react, Tom.
I appreciate
next.
that, but I also am concerned about that response, about the role of the community advisory group. Perhaps I need to go back and relook things and all, but it sounds like a much lessened role than I thought, but thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We have Marcus, and go ahead, Marcus.
Mine was similar. I thought I heard in the presentation somewhere about there had been 13, 14, 15,000 responses that you were kind of working your way through. And I know that myself and a couple other members I talked to took their time and answered those questions and gave feedback. And I am curious just to see the timing of going through that process. I want to see the comments from the community more so than just categories. That's all. Just I'm curious to see what people said specifically about all those questions. That was a long list that we went through. So that's it.
There will be a report, as I mentioned, that comes out the end of the month or early April. There were so many people that responded, Marcus. We're trying to make sure that we take our time and actually give those responses the time that they deserve. It will be a pretty substantial report that hopefully gets more at what you're asking than a high level, 15 slide run through of kind of what we've generally heard. This is more about preliminary results, where that is meant to be, once we put out those written reports, more of a comprehensive look at what we heard.
Okay, I appreciate that response. And by the way, I did agree with Tom. If we could get a little early time, even a day or two would help to go over stuff beforehand. But I appreciate how difficult it is to crank this stuff out. So thanks a lot.
Jasmine?
Hi, thank you. So I was actually just echoing a comment from earlier. I was a little concerned about the responses we received from low-income communities and our communities of color. And so I just want to make sure I lend my hand as the NAACP president on this side of the river, Vancouver, and however I can assist with getting more responses, whether that's just outreaching to Black churches or whatever that looks like, because I definitely think that we need a stronger voice from those that we didn't hear from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michaela?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about more of the youth perspective. I had a chance to talk with Lisa earlier this week, and just really kind of digging into that portion of the community, and just recognizing that myself and where I come from as a youth, and how that differs from, a lot of other people in the community, and just kind of recognizing that imbalance, and how that was something that was really important to me, and something that I really pushed for Lisa, was just kind of understanding my privilege and my relationship with the bridge, and understanding that that's not how a lot of other youth in my community might interact with the bridge in their own aspect. And so I'm just really excited to get the opportunity to talk to youth in the community and a wider perspective of youth. Just because as we were talking in terms of income levels and, the racial bias that comes with, taking an online survey, I think that it's really important that we get the aspects of and the opinions of people that don't come from, backgrounds like maybe I do. And so I'm just really excited for the opportunity to talk to different youth in the community and their relationship with the bridge and what they want to see as their future as they cross that bridge someday, to go to work or vice versa, crossing in from Portland to come to Vancouver for work. And I just think that it's really important that we gain that aspect and that vision from the youth in our community on both sides of the bridge. So I'm just really excited that, come next week, we're going to have that opportunity to talk to youth and then bring it back to you guys and kind of tell you all about what they see as the future of the bridge for them.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks for offering or being volunteered to participate in that set of youth listening sessions. Sam?
I just want to kind of give a different perspective. I appreciate Tom and Marcus wanting things earlier. I've been on numerous boards and commissions, and be careful what you ask for. I read everything you send me. I watch every video, and when you get 1,000-page homework assignment to do, then you're going to want to get this stuff a week earlier, a month earlier, and so. It is a tremendous amount of work, and I really do appreciate you guys summarizing for us and just giving us the essentials that we need to look at and making good use of my time because I'm just swamped day and evening and weekends, and so I have to be very judicious. However, I agree. If we can get them earlier, great. I would definitely read them earlier and perhaps even be better prepared. So I like to both echo, but also fear and trepidation of getting a 1,000-page document that I have to read the night before. I won't be able to do that. Second thing I would just want to say is I'm very impressed with the great response, great outreach. That's just tremendous. Oh my gosh, I'm glad I didn't have to talk to thousands of people. Glad you guys are doing that work. And so I think there's some credence to the work that we're doing, that we're reflecting for the most part what the community is thinking. So thank you for validating that. That's great work.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. I think what you saw in Katie's presentation is reflective of a lot of hard work and a lot of attention to this program. Those survey responses were about 4 times what we're seeing in terms of responses to other transportation programs in the area. But we're also seeing the gaps. And if we are committed to centering equity, we need to do things differently. And that's why you're seeing some change in our strategy and that individual outreach where we really do want that opportunity to connect with each of you. We know we send you a lot of emails, and so we want to make sure that we're having the dialogue to learn from you how else we can utilize the communities you're connected with. So thank you, Katie, and to the team for making all of that happen in about 28 days in February. So at this time, I think we're going to transition to our purpose and need and vision and values conversation. And one of the things that we are hearing is that this group is enjoying the opportunity for breakout sessions. We know that doesn't allow for our public to be involved in those sessions. We do think that it's pretty important for this group to continue to have some space to have a conversation. And it's important that we're debriefing what was said in those small group opportunities for comment and for conversation. So we are going to spend a little bit more time. The rest of the meeting is really dedicated to a little bit of kind of context in terms of purpose and need and vision and values, and then really spending time talking about the values piece and using our breakout session to really dig into your feedback as it relates to community values. And to set that up, Greg Johnson, our program administrator, has joined us. One of the things that's been so great about our community engagement is we have lots and lots of organizations that would like briefings. And so he was actually doing a presentation as we were getting started, but has joined us in time to set up this part of our agenda. And then we'll have Chris, our environmental program manager, step in as well. So I'll pass it on to you, Greg.
So thank you very much. And once again, I apologize for the cross scheduling, but I think it's key critical that I do take the time and meet with different groups so they can hear what's going on and become more involved with the engagement piece of this. But right now we're moving into that, we're not moving into it, we're in the middle of that critical stage of purpose and need and vision and values. So we wanted to make sure we had language in front of you folks that you can look at, you can discuss, you can agree, you can disagree. And I want to assure folks that we have time. This is not, you're going to look at it today and say, oh my God, this is it. You have time for feedback to the team. We're going to update the bi-state legislative group at the end of the month. We do not have to be done with this discussion by the end of the month. So I know there's a concern about how quickly we're moving, but I want to assure folks you will have time to get your input and for us to also take input from other engagement efforts that we have going. But this is a tremendously important effort, and I thank you in advance for the seriousness that you folks are gonna put to this. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say, Katie, that was an incredible presentation. As a biologist, I am so jealous of all the data you had. As a bureaucrat, I'm going to gravitate to the words now. So if I can get the slides up, that would be great. And we can go to the next slide too, as soon as you can. So I wanted to start out our conversation to restate some of the previous conversations we've had about what the National Environmental Policy Act is, where we are, how we're focusing our efforts. So when we did an orientation, we talked a lot about looking back at what was done before to figure out where we are and where we're going. The Interstate Bridge Replacement Team is utilizing previous work in today's context. And so what we're doing is looking at those environmental documents that were there before. And why are we doing this? We were directed by the legislature to utilize past work for efficient decision making. We have a record of decision, which is the final step of our federal environmental process through NEPA. That was published in the Federal Register. It remains in the Federal Register in law. So, and we had past work that included a 10-year effort to identify needs, collect data, and minimize impacts. So it's just this treasure trove of information that we can draw from, that we work from as we define what is today's context. So the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program is going to utilize and update this past work to help us identify a solution that reflects current community priorities. So how are we doing that? What have we been talking about? We're looking at updating our purpose and need and establishing vision and values. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose and need? The purpose statement concisely identifies what the proposed action is intended to accomplish. It's stated broadly enough that more than one solution can be considered. And then our statements of need. Our need explains why the proposed action has been undertaken, and it identifies existing or expected future problems within a defined area. These needs are transportation needs. It's within the realm of transportation planners and transportation professionals. It's a bit nuanced, but those need statements really do frame what we're trying to accomplish with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Next slide. So with the draft statement, we have received feedback from the community advisory group. Thank you so much. Really appreciated that. You sent that in, and our environmental team got that feedback. A quick review of that feedback looks like many of the concepts that you brought up in that are being addressed. The wording might not look the same, but in our review, those concepts are captured within those need statements. We're going to have some feedback will be more useful in later phases, so that when we start talking about solution-oriented or value-focused statements, We are going to come back to those. We're going to have more conversations with this group to ensure that we're getting those things right. We also sent you a draft statement before, as Greg said. You should have copies of that copy. We're reviewing community advisory group feedback and community input to ensure focus of concerns are incorporated. If you have any comments, if you have questions, tell us, please. Hopefully you have that information. We can pull that out as we dive into our breakout groups so that we can dive a little bit deeper. But we're absolutely, as Greg said, towards the end of what we've done right now is we've captured an initial draft of concepts that we've pulled together, and we're going to be working to refine that as we move towards May. The draft statement that is revised from this meeting and our check-in with our transportation partners is going to be sent out to you at the end of March for your March 24th meeting. And the little graphic that we have at the bottom of this slide here is part of what we're trying to accomplish. We have the community providing input. We have our advisory groups, including the equity advisory group and the community advisory group. And we have the executive steering group, which is made up of our transportation partners and their staff. And we're working with our technical partners. We're working with our transportation partners. We're working with NEPA professionals. And there's a lot of work that's going into focusing on words, editing those words, getting those words right. And part of what we want to do is jump back from that a little bit and really make sure we understand concepts. And those are concepts of, are there needs? Is there a purpose that we're not meeting? Is there a goal vision towards the end of this that we need to ensure that this foundation can consider within our alternatives? So we're on a path to deliver the final version late spring, but we really want to dive in and understand those concepts. Get this, get your opinions now. Next slide, please. So what we're going to be doing with this is we're going to take our purpose and need into alternative screening. Our purpose and need statements really are a pass-fail evaluation criteria. So that pass-fail, it says at a minimum, a reasonable alternative must address the program's problems. And so with the table graphic that we have here, what you see is just, and this is not a real screening for us, it's an example of how we might look at this. So from the past planning work, we looked at replacement bridge and we said, a mid-level or high-level bridge, either downstream or upstream. And then we had a whole bunch of criteria that we listed on columns. And we had a number of columns that included increased vehicular capacity or decreased vehicular demand, improved transit performance, improved freight mobility, improved safety and decreased vulnerability to incidents, improved bicycle and pedestrian mobility, reduced seismic risk of the I-5 Columbia River crossing. Of all of those ratings, the high-level bridges did not do well with improving safety, so they failed to advance as an alternative. Next slide, please. Vision and values goes a little bit deeper into content and talks a little bit about, leans towards that solution focus. Developing the vision and values, it's critical for program progress because it frames, it's a framework for guiding program development. It's a foundation for how we're going to evaluate different program and bridge replacement alternatives. It's a way to ensure that the program reflects the community and place. And it helps emphasize specific program elements and helps us choose how those elements should be incorporated into that design. It really starts splitting things out a little bit. It allows you to compare and contrast different alternatives. Next slide, please. So in the document that we provided to you earlier, our vision and values has two sections. There are draft critical objectives and there are draft community values. The draft critical objectives are vision and values as a value statement that is elevated to have a pass-fail element to it. And so this is part of the conversation that we're having with our transportation partners and with our federal leads. And so what we've said is that along with being able to refine specific elements and modify different alternatives with equity and climate change, we are also going to have more weight to it and say, if we don't meet specific, if we cannot deliver our program through an equity lens or through our climate lens, those alternatives won't advance. The draft community values include quality of life, mobility, travel, reliability, congestion reduction, modal choice, safety, regional economy, environment, funding and cost effectiveness, bi-state and local cooperation, and community engagement. Next slide, please. Just because I told you I was jealous with Katie's presentation, I grabbed a couple elements from it. Something that's really important to look at here. The community is very similar in makeup. You're very similar in perspective to what we've heard from the CAG. That's great. I think that that's a great statement of this body to reflect our community's values and needs. There are subtle differences when you look at specific prioritization, but that doesn't mean that one is less valuable or shouldn't have a role in helping to influence alternative selection. So in cost and funding, the overall community said limit funding options such as tolling that will direct impact users. And the CAG said design an iconic landmark for our region with innovative engineering that supports all modes of transportation. And one of the things that we were talking about after our equity advisory group, Lisa mentioned that one of our members was talking about in our breakout section that it would be what she really wanted to see was a park where somebody could sit and admire the bridge and look at the community and how it comes together. That's really a concept and a value that really helps us see how do we look at these vision and values and how do we use them as we screen alternatives. With transit and multimodal, both had the community and the CAG had extend light rail. The difference that we had teased out with this minor difference was providing public transit options for direct routes between Portland and Vancouver, Clark County, and creating a safe space for crossing the bridge on bike or on foot. Again, all of these are relevant, but we need that context and we need to be able to dive deeper and understand that context so that as the transportation professionals and the technical reviewers and the drafters understand your perspective and can ensure that these words reflect that context that you're providing to us. So next slide, please. So what we really want to do is dive in and ask a couple of questions for you. Help us think about this. Help us extend beyond those words. And then hopefully maybe soon I can deliver a presentation like Katie did. Again, thank you, Katie. What values best capture the community's priorities for a bridge replacement? As you think about what you want in that bridge, what are the community's priorities that we want reflected? And what do these values mean to you? The entire suite of values. Again, hopefully you all have that paper with you. And those are the two questions that we really want to focus on. And to focus on those, I believe, Lisa, you're going to help us out talking through what that looks like.
Thanks, Chris. So we've been through kind of this drill before. It's kind of magic, but we all head off to breakout rooms. And we'll have both a facilitator that will have those questions available. And then we'll have someone who's recording on Jamboards. And then we'll come back and we will be looking for someone from each of those breakout sessions to do a bit of a debrief in terms of what was discussed and what are some of those community priorities for this bridge replacement. So with that, Brent or Jennifer, do you want to move us into breakout rooms? Are there any questions before we?
Lisa, how long do you want before the group gets back together?
We're doing pretty well on timing. It would seem like a good 20 minutes makes sense, at least. Johnell, I'll ask you.
Yep. I think as much time as we can afford, the better for more group discussion.
Okay, Lisa and Johnell, this is Brent. We have 20 minutes and we can open our rooms now if there's no objections.
Okay.
All right, you should automatically go to your room. And if you are left in the main room, I will put you in a room if you joined a little bit late. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brent.
Getting y'all moved over right now. Welcome to Sandra. Are you here for public comment or are you here for part of the CAG?
Hi,
Right,
can you hear
yes.
me?
Yes, I can.
I'm late, so it might
Okay.
be that I just need to come to the next meeting.
Nope, you're good. I'm going to put you into breakout session. Just 1 second.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll wait just a few moments until everyone is back. And Brent, please tell me when everyone has arrived. Brent, is everyone back?
It looks like everyone is back.
Great. So now we're going to take, thank you for that small group discussion. We are now going to take a moment to do quick report outs. So folks can take a couple of moments to just report out. And if someone wants to just go ahead and kick us off, we'll go ahead and get started. So who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. We were in
Great.
group 2. And I guess kind of what we really focused in on for group 2 was we started discussing like community outreach. And so just ensuring that the community feels heard with the data that they provided through the survey or, you know, any other types of you know, outreach that we're doing, that we're asking the community for input, that they actually get to see the data that they are inputting their information into. And then somebody was talking about really the definition of community. You know, who is this? You know, is it the actual group that is, you know, working or living within the regional area? Or is it a greater aspect of, you know, businesses and people that live outside that travel to and from? And just really seeing that, like, what is that definition of community? And just making sure that, again, the community sees where their impact is being made, and that we are, you know, taking this data and utilizing it in a constructive way in order to help see decisions. And then our second one, we talked about safety. So that was looking at like the capacity of it. And I just was talking about how on Saturday, there was a 45-minute delay on the southbound bridge because somebody had jumped the walking lane barricade and jumped onto the bridge. And so that shut down traffic, and it required, you know, public safety officers and people to come and, you know, take care of the person that was out on the bridge. And so that was something that really just like sparked my thoughts about safety and the importance of walkways and, you know, bicycle transportation, as well as mass transit and like all of these other things, and how we can, you know, create this like seamless transportation system where everyone can utilize the bridge how they so choose, and get to the places that they need to be safely. And just, again, how we can like all move together. And then we also discussed like modal choice. So making the connections between, you know, one side of the river to the other. And then looking at autonomous vehicles. And then we kind of got into this like this kind of concept of design, and just really like designing a bridge for the future was a really big part of that conversation with modal choice. And really we're looking at, you know, other ways of transportation besides just the things that we think of in the here and the now.
Great. Group 1, could group 1 go next?
Were we group 1? I'm sorry.
No, Sherry, we're actually group 2.
Okay.
This was our group, guys.
So reporter for group 1.
I think she's trying to unmute. Bottom left. There you go.
For some reason, I can't read it. It's too small on my screen. I can't read any of those sticky notes.
We'll enlarge them here. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. So, so our group kind of noted, you know, first of all, that, you know, each of the values, depending on what perspective you bring, like if you're, you know, focusing on freight, or you're, you know, focusing on, you know, pedestrian access or safety, depending on your, you know, background and the perspective you bring to the table, each of those different values that was displayed kind of speaks to you more strongly than others, but kind of, you know, looking at it as a whole, you know, it's very reflective of the broader community, and the fact that if this bridge is able to roll all of these values into it, then it will be a true reflection of our broader community. And that's hopefully what we will find as a result. Certain things we spoke a lot about the cooperation piece between, you know, some of the history between the two states and wanting to make sure that this time it's going to be different and Oregon's not going to get left at the altar like last time. And so hopefully things will be given some of the changes that have taken place and the level of commitment that we're seeing from the legislators and some of the political dynamics that that will move forward this time. Also talked a lot about, you know, congestion and not wanting to, you know, especially for those that, you know, commute back and forth across the bridge for work, you know, not wanting to sit in traffic and, you know, having a better quality of life, which includes, you know, making sure that, you know, when you are crossing the bridge that it's safe, whether you're crossing it in a car or you're crossing it as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, that safety is a hugely important piece. And also, you know, brings a level of quality of life aspects. And then, you know, using that bridge truly as a bridge between two different communities, Oregon and Washington, and the cities and the counties, and having those different options of things that are available for entertainment and socialization and cultural activities, and being able to access those, that contributes greatly to the quality of life. So, you know, mobility, congestion, safety, quality of life, those were sort of the big ones. And then, you know, freight mobility and being able to, you know, make sure that all of this happens in a way that sort of comprehensively folds in all of those different values into the ultimate selection of whatever the bridge ultimately looks like, so that we do get to a bridge that truly is reflective of all of the community's values.
Great, thank you for that. And group number 3. Group 3.
Okay, I think this was our group. So we, when we're speaking about this, we really were kind of looking at this definitely from an equity piece. So we're really happy to see that kind of equity and climate change are kind of critical objectives of this project. And when we kind of making sure that equity is embedded throughout the process, including jobs, and not only is it just kind of for design and construction work of the bridge, but also the life cycle of the maintenance of this bridge as well, because that's going to be a huge piece and a huge cost. Is the ongoing maintenance for the life cycle of the bridge. So making sure that that is kind of embedded throughout the process that we're doing now, but also for the life of the bridge as well. And then really kind of moved into, you know, transportation equity. So it's income based. It's allowing that this bridge has got the options where anybody, no matter what their income may be, can access this bridge and use it. You know, so that kind of gets into, you know, modal choice. So making sure that, you know, biking and walking are high priorities for this bridge, allowing people to be able to move back and forth easily with those modes, and making sure that they don't get value engineered out for another travel lane. And really making sure, you know, as well as modal choice, biking and walking, that we're also looking at other public transit, whether that be light rail, whether that be, you know, bus, whatever that's also in there that allows anybody to use this bridge no matter what their background may be. And then we also kind of have kind of quality of life, really helping the communities come together, whether they're whatever side of the bridge they may be, or whatever side of the river they may be on, making sure that it really serves them and allows the opportunities for the quality of life to be best as possible. We also had in there about transparency as well. So just making sure that when we're going through discussing these priorities within the vision and values, that, you know, that things aren't predetermined, or if they are predetermined, that's kind of stated to us at the forefront, so we can we can have kind of good active conversations about these items. We also had in there kind of tribal consultation, so meeting the needs of the tribe. So you've got Cowlitz tribe there on the north of the river, and that's the kind of ancestral land. So making sure that you know, the waterways are kind of a big piece, and we're talking about transportation and what this bridge does, but you know, the water is a big transportation piece for the tribe. So making sure that they kind of have unencumbered access to the bridge as well. And then we kind of also kind of keeping cost in mind. I know the word kind of iconic bridge has been put around, but making sure that this bridge is really going to, the function of the bridge is kind of taken into account more than just how it may look. So just, again, just keeping that one always in the back of everyone's mind as we're talking and thinking about this.
Great, thank you for that. And group four, you want to round us out here?
Yeah, that's me. I want to piggyback for a second on what Ryan just said as far as iconic bridge. Our group tends to think, you know, because of the significance of the bridge and the fact that, you know, there's so many neighbors that have to look at it every day, that aesthetics, you know, seem to be an important factor for our group. So obviously function over form, but with consideration for aesthetics and something that we all are proud to look at and proud to have visitors see. Congestion and safety, those were values that I think came up probably more so than anything during our group discussion. Mobility, travel, congestion, reliability, mobility, you know, in terms of people, in terms of freight, in terms of...
I apologize, Sherry. I think I promised you notes, but I think our notes are on 2. So we might have got our numbers wrong first. So I just want to make sure I promised you, Sherry, I want to give you the right notes.
Yeah, that looks like us. Yeah, and I'm actually not going to be able to see this very well. Sorry. You know, those other comments were sounding a lot like ours, so I guess we can kind of see a theme here.
Is that a little bit better there?
Yeah, that's better. So I'm not to repeat myself, but safety and mobility, obviously, these are 2 of the biggest values for the Washington Trucking Association. So accessibility, tolling when they were pushed out of their homes. I apologize, but I don't remember exactly what the discussion was on that. I can imagine equity in tolling, consideration for low-income folks, people that are, you know, just trying to get to work every day. I had this discussion in a different arena today, so fully understand that. Obviously, the resilience of the bridge, we have the devastating impact of a potential earthquake. So that's, you know, obviously a #1 concern everyone wants to address. Keeping the work here in Washington and Oregon, keeping the money here in Washington and Oregon, and as far as the building trades go. Future-proofing, and I thought that was a really good comment that actually encompasses a lot of things. Just ensuring that it's going to last us 100 years, and that it's taking into consideration today's needs that, you know, are obviously much, much different than when the bridge was built 100 years ago. Let's see. Economic empowerment, care about distribution of costs and benefits, kind of back to keeping things local. Recognizing history of the area, West Coast, Oregon, and Washington. You know, I think that had to do with the past conversations, and you know, I honestly, I think I barely lived in the state of Washington when that was all going on. So luckily, as being a Washingtonian now, I have a fresh perspective on this. At least I feel like I do. So that's a good thing. And sustainable, build something sustainable, again, resilient, sustainable. It's going to last. It's going to do what we need it to do for a very long time into the future. And trying to fix the bottlenecks. You know, observation was made, and that we move bottlenecks, that we don't necessarily fix bottlenecks. And I think, you know, this is a way for us to rethink the mobility of the various users of the bridge for today's terms.
Great. Thank you for that. And thanks to all of you for that really terrific feedback. It's really quite comprehensive and wonderful. So if we can get the slides back up here, I'll just preview what's coming up next, and then we'll jump into public comment. So we'll just, Brent or someone, if you can get the slides up there, please. Great. Next slide, please. Just to give you a preview of what's forthcoming as we look at our March 24th meeting, we'll spend some time reviewing our community charter, as well as reviewing our operating norms. And then we'll continue the discussion on vision and values, again, as the project continues to make progress on purpose and need and vision and values. Next slide, please. So now we are going to receive public comment. Next slide, I'll review sort of our instructions just yet again. Just a note for our public comment, to make a live comment via phone, please dial 669-900-6833 or 408-638-0968. The meeting ID is 993-5459-6043. The passcode is 674942. Please press *9 to raise your hand. I'll call on participants to provide comment. Just a reminder to also press *6 to unmute yourself. Please provide your name and affiliation. We'll have roughly 10 minutes for public comment. Each speaker will have 2 minutes, and please do keep your comments to 2 minutes. I will unfortunately need to cut you off if it's beyond 2 minutes in the name of being fair to everyone. And so please help me help you by not having to do that. Next slide, please. To submit comment after the meeting, you can fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. You may also call 360-859-0494 for Washington, 503-897-9218 Oregon, or 188-503-6735. Again, please indicate CAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. Next slide. You could back up. And so at this point, we'll take public comment. Brent, if you can help me know which public comment, who we have for public comment, I will start my clock here.
We have 2 available, so I'm going to admit 6225 first.
Okay.
Ask them to unmute.
If you have 6225, please unmute yourself.
Hi there. This is John Lee from Camas. I'm calling as a private citizen. I'm asking a question I am wondering if any of the members of this committee have seen the U.S. Geologic Survey map of what the Portland region would look like in the aftermath of a 9.0 Cascadia earthquake. It's absolutely devastating. It's very eye-opening. And basically, the most devastation happens along the Willamette River and along both sides of the Columbia River. Obviously, Interstate 5 travels along that same corridor. Furthermore, I was stunned that people would choose light rail as a preferred method of transit if you understand that a Cascadia fault would devastate not only the bridge, but also everything along I-5. Because light rail, every single light rail train crosses the steel bridge. That is 5 years older than the interstate bridge at 109 years old. And therefore, it makes no sense to have a transit option that potentially crosses a new bridge, but yet the steel bridge and the bridges into downtown Portland are all destroyed in that level of an earthquake. Finally, I would just like to mention to the committee that there is zero demand for high-capacity transit crossing the Columbia River. Last year, in the aftermath of COVID, only 486 people on an average day rode any of the 7 express bus lines from Clark County into Portland. That's 69 people per day traveling any of the 7 lines into Portland. That's basically 2 buses of people on each of those lines going into Portland. So there is no demand for high capacity. Our present bus service is flexible.
And we're
it's
at
wonderful.
time. We're at time. Thank you very much for your comments. Brent, who's up next?
We have phone number 4524.
Okay, 4524. Please proceed. For 524, please offer your public comment if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, please proceed. Your time starts now.
Hi, I'm Joe Courtwright. I'm with No More Freeways. I have submitted a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to give. Unfortunately, you only allow phone comment. So at some future meeting, I would like the same opportunity that is afforded your staff to present information. The PowerPoint presentation, which you can review, provides documentation on 3 facts. First, widening freeways does nothing to reduce congestion. There's something called the fundamental law of road congestion that's well documented in the literature. Adding more lanes simply creates more traffic, which encourages more pollution, and you end up not solving the congestion problem by having more capacity. 2, it's apparent this project cannot be financed without tolls. And I know the group is very concerned about equity, but ODOT's own numbers say that the tolls needed to pay even a portion of the cost of this project would be $3.25 each way at the peak hour and a minimum of $2.60 for every crossing. So when you think about what kind of bridge you want, be aware that it requires tolls. And ODOT's own numbers show if you toll only I-5, you'll produce unacceptable diversion to I-205, and the I-5 bridge will be underutilized for the next 20 years. It will carry only 2/3 as much traffic if it carries now. You have to pay the toll levels, according to ODOT's own forecasts. Finally, despite all of the hyperventilation about freight and freight movement in this corridor is essentially irrelevant to Oregon's long-term economic prospects. As long as there's a road there, freight can move, and freight moves adequately. But freight has decoupled from the Oregon economy. Freight movement over the Columbia River on the 2 bridges is down 20% in the last 15 years, and Oregon's economic output is up 70%. 500,000 fewer trucks cross the Columbia River today than 15 years
And you're
ago.
at time.
Yet our
Thank you for your
economy is
comment.
more successful.
You're
I'd
at time.
appreciate the opportunity that's afforded your staff.
Great, thank you for that. Do we have any other comment, Brent?
At this time, we do not have any further public comments.
Great. Thank you for that. With that, we are going to wrap up. Mr. Chairman, I'm turning it over to you to tell us our wrap up. Ed?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I would just like to say that there were some questions that were raised. I'm sure that I'll be making sure that that message is carried on behalf of the committee to the staff. The staff, so they don't work for me, but they will talk with me. And so we'll look at that and get that information back to you. Some people raise some concerns, so we'll get that covered. And I just want to thank all of you for being part of this. And I think that, you know, to me, and go to all the meetings that I attend, to me, it's a lot like building a house. And I think anybody who is having a house built, you know, it's a slow process, although it probably doesn't take as long as a bridge. But then, you know, you go through it. If there are changes, things have to change. But then before you know it, the house gets framed, it gets windows, and before long, you're there. And I just hope that we will keep that same kind of sense in mind about what we're trying to do with this bridge. It's a slow process, but it will begin to take shape, and it will only do that with the help of all of you. Hang in there, everybody. We'll get there. And thank you so very much. Until the next meeting. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And just a reminder that we have our listening sessions coming up this week. So feel free to ensure that we get the word out. With that, everyone, Greg, did you have any final comments before we wrap up?
I don't. I just want to thank everybody for their participation. It's as Ed mentioned, this is a long process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So we'll get there.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Thanks for your participation, and hope you can enjoy a little bit of the sun while we still have it left. So have a great evening.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.